Coming up on today's Locked On Bucks, we take a look ahead to this upcoming season. Who are the players on the Bucks roster that have the most to prove this upcoming year? We'll dig into that conversation and to take a look ahead to the Olympics, which are now already here. We will give you your primer on Giannis and Team Greece and what to watch for on Team USA coming up next on Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into Locked On Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia, joined as always by Camille Davis, and we thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen every day, free and available wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us on YouTube as well, all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's Locked On Bucks is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. The playoffs have wound down. The sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. Something for everyone every day all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Camille, we mentioned this is going to be the I suppose the closest thing we can provide to the national show of here's what this player has at stake and here's what this means for his legacy. But this is what that episode is. Looking ahead to this upcoming season, we talked about 2 straight years of first round exit. Mm-hmm. We gave all the reasoning or excuses, however you choose to view it, about what went wrong last year and why. So now we reach the point where it is put up or shut up time for a group that continues to get older. And this may be the last year of the window. And with that, who are the guys that you are going to be looking at the most to say, okay, you got to show me something? I think there's some very obvious contenders on this team, but I think, that's also the interesting part is it's not just 1 or 2 guys. And that doesn't even mean it's a bad thing, right? Mm-hmm. But there's a number of players that you could look at and say, okay, the last few years didn't go as you anticipated, and X, Y, and Z happened. Giannis with health, Khris Middleton with health, Damian Lillard with being uprooted, and MarJon Beauchamp, as we talked about, players continually placed in front of him. So there's a number of factors in there, and the Bucks have maybe the most players on a roster of any team in the league when you would look at that and say, okay, who's had those interesting seasons that you would look at and say, this year's important to really show me something? I think the Bucks are probably leading the league in that category.
Yeah, and I think a big one to start with is actually Damian Lillard. And before I get into that, let me just say, I'm coming down with something. So excuse the voice if it goes in or out throughout the episode. But I do think we have to start with Dame, just because that's such a crucial part of this team. We've talked about how the roster is constructed with the Bucks being very top heavy. So if things aren't going well with Giannis and Dame and Khris, most likely the chances for the Bucks are not going to be good. And this past season with Dame, there were a lot of ups and downs. More so, I think, just consistency of play with Dame. If I remember correctly, he had a really bad January, and it just was like every other month. It was kind of like, I'm not exactly sure which Dame we're going to get. And he's somebody who came out himself and said, like, just having an off season where I know I'm going to be at, being able to train is going to help me out so much. We know he had the off-court things going on last season as well, in addition to moving to a new city for the first time in his NBA career. So there were a lot of different factors at play, but the Bucks are going to need that Dame they saw in the playoffs before the injuries, like to really make some movement in the East.
It's a good one to start with because I hate to, and I know we included it in the graphics, I hate to use legacy because of the jump that you're really taking there. But I think this is probably going to be viewed as a legacy type of season for Damian Lillard by outsiders, at least. You caught our attention all those years early on in Portland, and it became somewhat of a novelty with the Dame time. And we all remember some of his big playoff moments. That shot against the Houston Rockets to win the series, obviously the iconic one against Paul George, which Bucks fans would certainly be hoping to see once more in the playoffs. But to win that series against the Oklahoma City Thunder. But then the last couple of years, that conversation changed somewhat. Injuries were part of it. The fact that it was almost held against him, very similar to another player on the team. that he kind of wanted to stay in Portland in a smaller market at a team that maybe didn't have a clearer path to a title, and just said, no, I like the comment too about I don't run from the grind. Like that was Damian Lillard of now let's figure out how to make this happen in Portland. And in fairness, he probably gave that too much of a shot than he should have those last couple of years. All that being said is, that those things start to pile up and happen. And the league is in a very healthy spot with young rising stars as well. You get lost in the shuffle. I mean, the fact that it was a conversation early in the season of, is Damian Lillard even an all-star this season? I know ultimately he got the nod, but that was something that was pushed back on by a select group of basketball fans and viewers. And that just kind of speaks to what the year was, that there's that joke of, well, you go to the Eastern Conference, you're in line for a boost in scoring and pay and everything else if you're coming from the West. Wasn't really the case for Dame, but as we've documented, there were a number of reasons why that was the case. I say all that to say this, he's won, I don't even want to say monster season. Like if his numbers are better than they were last year, and again, he bad last year, he just wasn't the Damian Lillard you anticipated to get. If his numbers are better than that, if the Bucks are finding more success, if it looks like, man, this is really clicking with he and Giannis, he's not going to be in the, is he a top 5 or probably 10 player in the league conversations, but it puts him right back on the radar. And all of a sudden you start to forget a lot more of the last couple of years in Portland and how he suddenly started to become an afterthought when he was one of the biggest stars in the league.
He truly was. And I mean, I think about the reaction that he got during that first game against the Pacers in the playoffs, where a lot of people were like, oh, this is Dame time. This is what we've been waiting for. Like, I forgive everything else. Like, this is what we signed up for when he had that big explosion. And just getting that consistency. And I think part of that is linked to Doc Rivers as well. He's someone else who I think has a lot at stake this upcoming season, just given the perception of Doc Rivers. We know he won the championship with the Celtics back in 2008, but 2008 was a long time ago. And since that championship with the Clippers, with the 76ers, there have just been some unceremonious exits from the playoffs for Doc, which has a lot of people questioning, just his coaching chops, what he really is about, and if he is the right guy to lead the Bucks going forward. So I think for Doc, we mentioned last season, just seeing a half a season of work with him, that it was like, okay, we kind of see the defense improving, the offense taking a step back, but they're trying to work some new things out, so on and so forth. But we kind of call that like an audit year. He only had half a season. He came in halfway through the year, didn't have much time to practice, no training camp, couldn't have his own staff. But now all that's in place now. So there aren't really anything else to say like, well, Doc didn't have this in his favor. So like now it's time for somebody to look at what Doc's going to do and really judge him on that now. Because again, he has a reputation over the last few years of a coach not being able to get it done, quote unquote. So he has a really good opportunity here in Milwaukee to change that narrative as well.
Yeah, and I mean the story too of, hey, Doc Rivers back to that level, leads the team to a finals, and doing it in Milwaukee would certainly add to the storytelling piece there. I think the Doc one we've talked about more than anyone, but I agree with everything that you said too of, this is the year too that you really rate and judge the Doc Rivers performance. He probably got a bit of a head start on the rest of the group, as he's kind of joked too that I got to take half a year to learn some of these guys and see what works, what doesn't work, what we really need to dig into in the offseason. Comments like those are only going to amplify that pressure on Doc Rivers, because the moment the Bucks go through one of those slides, and it's gonna happen, it happens to every team, but the moment they have the 5 or 6 game losing streak next season, you're going to start to hear some of that Doc Rivers chatter once more. Still a handful of players that we haven't gotten to. One is the obvious piece as well. And then Giannis. What we mentioned, I should say, for Damian Lillard, some of the same applies to Giannis. We'll get into that conversation coming up next on Locked On Bucks. Well, I love sports so much, I never want them to stop. And I know you all feel the same way. But we hit that point on the calendar where the sports playoffs have started to wind down and just getting fewer games than we're used to. Sports aren't sporting like we want them to. However, FanDuel keeps you and the sports going whenever you want. All you have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime you're in the mood. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, something for everyone every day all summer long. Head over to FanDuel.com to start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. So, Camille, I mentioned, hey, there's an obvious one we haven't gotten to yet. We'll do that coming up next. Spoiler alert, it's Khris Middleton. I don't really feel like taking more arrows. I'm sure you feel the same way. We've put it out there. It's no secret how we feel about Khris, where we view him in his standing on this team. That being said, it's kind of similar to the injuries and is he injury prone conversations that we've had of, I mean, not really, but I get the raw games missed as a big piece. I think it's the same with this next point in that, look, he's great. I think his value to the team remains to be underrated, but I get that the health is a frustration and that value is only there if he's on the floor. I don't really care about the regular season to an extent, right? I mean, you obviously don't want Khris to be playing in 25 or 30 games.
Right.
I saw last time we brought it up, people pushing back to if it's going to be 40 games or 45. He played 55 last season. Obviously not ideal. And there's no way of predicting this. But if you were to tell me, all right, he plays 50 games, 56 games, somewhere around there, but he's healthy for the playoffs. All right, fine. I'll even give you a couple more games. Like that is the ultimate goal. He has to be healthy for the playoffs. And that was the frustrating part about last year. He was, and he was very good. No one else around him was. So you need the two to be working together. This to me is a big one because if he can stay healthy, and I know people are already rolling their eyes. I can sense it now. The dual surgery on both ankles, right? But if he can stay healthy and be healthy for the playoffs, what he gave you against the Pacers, if Giannis and Dame are healthy in the playoffs, you don't need that. But just knowing, hey, it's there in case there's a game or a moment where we need it. That's what makes this trio so deadly. And it's a big year for Khris, too, because the contract piece, right? He can pick up his player option. He can decline and extend. And again, I know that's something that Bucks fans are going to roll their eyes at. But if you can keep him on ice and keep him healthy, and he gives you the ability to do what he did against the Pacers, and frankly, what he's done throughout his career in the playoffs, I'm not shutting the door on extending him at a team-friendly rate. Now, keep in mind, that doesn't mean he's going to go from $35 million down to $7 million.
Right.
But any type of savings you can get there is going to be helpful, and it's just going to help you mitigate the next wave of Bucks basketball as this team starts to age out of this bracket. So to me, that's maybe the most important who has a lot to prove season is Khris Middleton. And in fairness, I think he's already proven a lot of this, but it's just a don't slip on a banana peel. Don't let anything happen to you this year.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I also agree with the fact that I think that he has proven himself already. But for Khris, it's going to be a thing where he has to continuously prove it year. And he doesn't get a benefit of the doubt from many Bucks fans. And I do understand one part of the argument for some of the people who have been not anti-Khris Middleton, but more so like we should trade Khris Middleton, which was, when is his value going to be any higher? If we continue down this road and he continues to miss games or so on and so forth, or we see a decline in play, we've missed our window to try to trade Khris Middleton for a better player while he had high value. So I do get that aspect of it, but my pushback on that is generally just how well he fits with this team, with Giannis. And I'm like, show me the trade for Khris Middleton that like can really improve the team, and I'll listen to it for sure. But what he's able to bring to the team when he's healthy, again, the shot creation, the playmaking, just him being a glue guy and understanding. And that's a big piece of it too when you think of team chemistry, of just being somebody on the team who's like, I'm going to do my job. If I only get 5 shots tonight, I only get 5 shots tonight, but I'm here to be the guy to take something off of everybody else. whether that's with playmaking, whether that's with offense. I'm going to try to do what I can to help my teammates out. And that's just a really big part of Khris Middleton's game. That's something that he mentioned himself when he was out with that ankle injury for 16 games during the last stretch of this past season. I'm seeing guys having to do more than what they normally should. And I know when I come back in, I can help that out and kind of help the hierarchy of shot selection, of just the flow of the game. And when he brings that to the table, like it is so needed. Like I just recently went back and watched the highlights from the Pacers series with Khris Middleton, and just seeing how he was controlling the game. Like, again, the Bucks were down ball handlers quite a few times throughout that series. So seeing him come in with that aspect as well. And I know everybody points to the turnovers with Khris Middleton. He doesn't actually average that many. I think it's just that his turnovers always tend to be very like, what in the world?
Out.
Yeah, they stand out. He doesn't have many, but the ones he do have, like they do stand out. So Khris is going to be somebody, I think, for as long as he's wearing a Bucks jersey, is going to have something to prove to somebody.
It's like the habitual speeder that doesn't have a speeding ticket because they've never done it in front of a cop, right? Or they've missed the speed traps, but you're the person that occasionally does. Like, yeah, I do my fair share of speeding, but I'm running late for work this day and I did it right in front of police. Like that's what stands out. You get the ticket. Yep. Yeah, we're not denying some of the turnovers that Khris has are oh boy. Yeah, I just spent 40 minutes defending you yesterday, and then we see those 3 entry passes. But yeah, the numbers don't match that he is this human turnover machine. I think it's just the optics of when and where they occur. And you kind of touched on it with that last point, but he's interested in this conversation because I don't think he has, at least from the levels that we've reached, I don't think he has all that much to gain. I mean, unless he has a 2021 playoffs run type of performance when it's like, man. And look, if we're having the conversation, is Khris Middleton the second best player on the team? I don't know that that's a good thing for Khris Middleton. I think that means negatives for other things that happen. But I think he has more to lose than gain. Similar things that we talked about with Damian Lillard, where, after a couple of years, you just start to become this. And that's the narrative that sets in. If we see what we just kind of walked through, I hope we don't get this. If you do, that just starts to stick to him. That, well, he's the guy that he was really good early and he was underrated, but then he got paid and then injuries started to pile up. So I think that's what's really the at stake, quote unquote, portion of this season for Khris. Real quick before we jump into the next break and save the conversation for the biggest piece, but are there any young guys other than the obvious? I think you would drift towards MarJon and say, look, we didn't see what we were hoping to see in summer league. Who knows what that means for the 4th year? Rookie option. Who knows what that means for playing time? Right. I would assume he's the most obvious choice to say, you literally have the most to prove because this may be it. This may be the make it or break it season. I see you seem to agree with that. Is there any other young guy that's worth pointing out here?
I think I'll go with AJ Green, just because we haven't seen him this summer. He was somebody who I was like, oh, you got the graduation from summer league, like good for you. But like, what does that mean for his actual playing time and him getting on the court? So I think for AJ, because we saw him in that Pacers series and the shot wasn't really falling for him throughout that series. Just what does this regular season look like for him? Does he show himself as somebody who can be a real piece in this rotation? Because we've talked a lot about the other young guys and their skill sets with the defense, the athleticism, but the shooting touch from AJ Green is something really, really special. So if he can continue to hone on that and continue growing in that aspect, like that's an NBA skill that's going to get you on the court. So I think he has a lot to prove as well, just as a guy who didn't have to go through summer league and like, what does that mean for you going forward? So he's somebody who's on my radar for sure.
I would agree with that. And that kind of brings us to the biggest player on the team. So we'll get into what this season means for Giannis coming up next on Locked On Bucks. Well, time to talk to you about our friends over at Game Time. I have talked about not using Game Time and the experience I've had using Game Time in the past, but it's summertime. We're all hitting the road, taking some types of vacations. Camille was just in Vegas and checked out the WNBA All-Star Game. Game Time is the #1 app you want for those situations, especially when you're out of your home market, exploring a new arena, stadium, or ballpark for the first time. You may not know What are the best deals I can get on my seats? What's my view going to look like? How much is it going to cost to get me into this building? And Game Time is there to give you all those answers and more. You can save up to 60% off when you're buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and any other event you can dream of. They even have flash deals where you save even more with exclusive in-app savings on select seats ahead of the game or event. Most importantly, toggle that feature on that shows you the all-in pricing so you know exactly what you are paying with no sticker shock once you get to checkout. And you get panoramic views from your seat. You can see that within the app before you buy your tickets. Best of all, comes with the lowest price guarantee, where Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you can find those seats cheaper, and your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem that code LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDONNBA, to get $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Camille, it brings us up to Giannis and what this season can mean for him. So we put it in there of, hey, are people sleeping on Giannis? And that's kind of the joke, is it's something that we've pointed out for the last 3 years, ever since he did not win the MVP award. Granted, there was an NBA championship in the mix there, but especially these last 2 years, when you looked at the numbers, it felt like we were banging our heads against the wall early in the season when we pointed out his efficiency numbers, and yet you couldn't get a mention. 2 years ago, to me, was the real crime, that he was not heavily considered or won the MVP award. But we've kind of started to hit that point with Giannis, kind of similar to what we talked about with Dame. Again, he's the guy that's staying with the same team in the smaller market, trying to fight it through. Granted, he did get a title. But at some point, we just get kind of bored with you, and we look for, all right, here's the next big thing. Here's the next thing to focus on. Oftentimes, you can see that comeback period a couple of years later, and I think we experienced it with Steph Curry, obviously in 2022, when, holy cow, Steph led the Warriors to a title without Kevin Durant and without some of those smaller pieces, a different group of Warriors players. And I kind of feel like we're starting to head back to that place for Giannis. And again, it's kind of tied to the health of Khris Middleton, what you get from Damian Lillard as well. But if the Bucks are a NBA Finals team, obviously Damian Lillard is going to be a big piece of that. But Giannis is going to be the biggest reason why. And I think a number of things are factoring into, okay, this is an interesting season for Giannis. More stability after a year that had none of it. More of that relationship with Damian Lillard and figuring out that pairing and giving him something he has never had before. More of an understanding of Doc Rivers and how he's going to use him. The fact that he kept a lot of those comfort pieces, too, that at least so far, he knows how to play with Pat Connaughton and Bobby Portis. He has Brook Lopez as a helper where he doesn't have to be the 7-foot rim protector. But the other pieces that lend itself to MVP types of discussions are, again, I think we're cycling past we're bored with Giannis and getting back into this guy's actually really good. And we haven't spent a lot of time discussing that he's doing this and nobody's done this since this year. And I think that's kind of where we're at coming into this season, is the national media and everyone else is, okay, Giannis, if you guys come out and you don't do what you did last year and you're actually playing well and you're putting up those numbers, welcome back to the discussion and the party.
I think part of what goes against Giannis is that it's just sustained greatness. Like, he has found what he excels at in the league, and he continues to do it at a very, very high level. We mentioned the fact that this past year he was, again, setting history, being the first player in NBA history to shoot at least 60% from the field while scoring at least 30 points. So just the efficiency from him, the clip that he scores at. I mean, he shot like 64, 65% from twos alone. And we know a lot of that comes in the paint. So I think for Giannis, and he's also been a top 4 MVP finisher the last 4 years after the 2 back-to-back MVP years. So I think for Giannis, it's because like if he came out this year, let's say, for example, he had an excellent post game, or he was knocking down threes at a 33% clip, something like that, where it's a little bit different from what we've seen from Giannis in the past. I think that's what gives him the boost more than anything else, because people are used to him being great in the way that he has been great. And a lot of times people get fatigued by that. So they don't, necessarily give you the love that you deserve for it. I'm not saying I think that's what Giannis has to do in order to take the next step, but I think that's part of why like national media and just the conversation around him has been what it has been, because it's sustained greatness. It hasn't been anything really new in this game. He's just been doing it at a very high level, and the Bucks need that from him. But I am curious going into this season here with Dame, with Doc, how his usage changes, if at all. We did hear Doc mention things like, we know Giannis likes having the ball in his hands, coming down the court to bring the ball up. Off of a miss, I want it with Giannis. Off of make, give it to Dame. That's just them trying to figure out their chemistry and their usage. I think it's going to be really interesting this upcoming season. I do think that people have been sleeping on what Giannis has done. And I mentioned even this year that I thought that his name should have been brought up more in the MVP discussion before the Bucks were on that losing streak to kind of end the season, which I think really dampened any hopes of a late, MVP push for Giannis. But it's about his usage. So I'm curious to see how that looks for him. Because if the Bucks have another first round flame out this upcoming year, like this feels like it's the last of this particular iteration of the Bucks then.
Yeah. I mean, if that happens, this is the last dance for this group. And this is not you or I questioning the greatness of Giannis, but if that does happen, those are the things that stick to you. When it comes up in the discourse, in any conversation that you have about those players, yeah, but he had 3 straight first round exits. Michael Jordan never lost in the first round. Like those types of things will come up. And Michael Jordan did lose in the first round, but just for the sake of the argument, well, this player never did that. That's what starts to pop up. So I think that's why this is an important season for Giannis. I mean, as we've gone through all offseason, it's an important season for this entire team, for everybody, top to bottom. Some of those coaches, obviously John Horst and the team that he put together, Giannis and Dame and Khris and the young guys that we've gone through. So I just think it's a fascinating group for that reason alone, that they have the most of those individual pieces. You would say, man, they got a lot at stake this upcoming season. It brings us to the weekend, though, Camille, where what the opening ceremonies are tonight, I believe, Friday night for the Olympics. Giannis is going to be the flag bearer for Greece. LeBron James for Team USA. Hard to believe, but also not, that LeBron has never done that when you think, oh, that's interesting. But then you think about all the other athletes that Team USA has had for Summer Olympics, and we're focused on basketball. But there's a lot of people that like track and field and gymnastics and follow that all throughout. So on the one hand, you think, wow, that's interesting. But then, no, I kind of get it. For Giannis, it's going to be very special. Same for LeBron. This is also the first and likely last Olympic Games for Steph Curry. So that's going to be interesting to check out. And Team USA's first game is Sunday afternoon against Serbia, or Sunday morning, actually, at 10 o'clock Central Time. And as for Greece, they are in the group of death, but Greece open up play with Team Canada tomorrow, Saturday afternoon. So we will keep our eye on Giannis's performances for Team Greece, anything that pops as well for Team USA. And I'm sure if you're listening to this show, you're probably checking out as much of the men's and women's basketball in the Summer Olympics then you can. But I mentioned that that group of death for Greece: Australia, Spain, and Canada are those 3 teams that are in there with them. Team USA in Group C, they have Serbia, Puerto Rico, South Sudan. So not quite the same draw that we have there. But look, it's been much hyped. And when you look up and down at the rosters, I don't know how much. We obviously watched a few of those we watched a few of those friendlies and other games as well with Giannis and Team Greece, watching both of the games Team USA played to get ready for the Olympics, all 3 of them actually, but the 2 close ones. It really drives home. Team USA should win this, but man, there is a ton of talent out there that it's long gone are the days where it's Team USA. And then there's like one or two teams that, yeah, they're interesting. It's going to be interesting to see who wins the silver, who wins the bronze, or could they push Team USA for a half? No, I expect Team USA to win, but at the same point, even though they're heavy favorites, I'm not going to be shocked if they lose, given what we saw in the lead up and all the talent that is out there on all these other teams. I think especially France and Canada, we mentioned Serbia and the group that they have, Germany too, and they have the model of they keep guys together through international play where there's that built-in consistency and continuity and chemistry. So there's going to be a lot of landmines out there for the Americans.
There is. It's been made a point to just point out the fact that, the Dream Team played less than 10 NBA players throughout their Olympic run. But meanwhile, Team USA this year is going to have to play at least 60 different NBA players on different international teams. And I mean, just even looking at the group that Greece finds themselves in with Canada, Canada has 10 current NBA players on it, one former one. Australia has 8 current NBA players with 2 former, and Spain has 2 current NBA players with 5 former NBA players. Like, just the amount of talent now, like the game is so much different than it was when the Dream Team was running through everybody. Like, the game is global now. You're not going to see teams trying to take pictures of Team USA anymore, get autographs. Like, those days are long gone. And all these other countries that are showing up, they're here to play. They're here to win as well. So I also expect gold for Team USA, but I will be the first to admit that the pathway for them to get gold is going to be one of the most challenging ones that Team USA has had to face throughout just this Olympic basketball career since they've had the NBA players playing for the teams.
Yeah, I remember being a kid and watching the Summer Olympics, obviously just being in awe of the Dream Team and then the following iterations of the Dream Team. But especially in that 92 and 96 Olympic Games, when you would watch and randomly the following fall and winter, when you'd be watching NBA games, somebody would pop up like Sarunas Marciulionis was the one that I remember the most of. Oh, that's the guy from the Olympics. Wow, he's in the NBA. Like, you would have 2 or 3 examples of that. And now it's, as you pointed to, it's everywhere when you look it up and down these rosters. And it's kind of the same too, where you'll occasionally see names of, oh, I remember that guy, like Rudy Fernandez. Oh, he's still playing. Yep. Wow. But it just speaks to the health of where this game is at globally. So again, Greece plays on Saturday. I believe that's a 2:00 tip against Team Canada. It's going to be that is going to be a very interesting game to watch, because Canada is one of those teams we said, hey, USA comes up short. You mentioned the number of NBA players they have on the roster. Don't really have any bigs, but they probably have the best collection of guards in this tournament. So that's going to be a fun one to watch. Giannis versus that backcourt. And then Team USA getting started, I think it's 10:15 tip on Sunday. That Team USA will have for their first men's Olympic basketball game, Serbia and Team USA. So a lot to look forward to this weekend. As we mentioned, we'll recap Giannis's performances and anything of note for Team USA all throughout the Olympics. Next week, we are going to shift to a little bit of time off. Obviously, we'll have more episodes out there if the situation warrants. But we're probably going to shift to a Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule for the next couple of weeks here. So just be aware of that. I know we didn't have quite as many this week for a number of scheduling issues. As I mentioned, Camille was on vacation, coming back from Vegas.
Y'all hear my voice?
Brought a cold with her. But next week, we're going to make that shift. We do have an interview planned for next week as well. I won't spoil it. This person has told me and even showed me documented proof that they are an everyday listener of the show. And I know it's someone that the audience is very, very excited to hear from. So you know what? We probably should mention who it is, Camille, and then we can give the listeners an opportunity to get any questions they have too, as we can do a Q&A. So Melanie Ricks is going to be joining us next week. I had the chance to get to know her and work with her on that courtside show and see what she's grown into now as the sideline reporter and digital reporter for the Bucks, and now doing some work for Big Ten Network as well. So Melanie Ricks is going to be on the show with us next week. I believe it's probably going to drop Wednesday. But if you have questions for Melanie, leave them in the chat here. Send them to Camille or myself on Twitter, and we will go through some of those questions, her journey, her thoughts on the offseason, all of it sometime next week on Locked On Bucks. That'll do it for today, though. For Camille, I'm Justin. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow on Locked On Bucks.